Pandemics. With the current state of the world, you're probably already familiar with the term. A contagious disease that can spread to thousands of people across countries in a matter of days. Many people perish, but perhaps no pandemic can compare to the death toll brought upon by the most infamous plague in history, the Black Death. The Black Death, aka the Great Mortality, aka the Pestilence, was a mid-14th century pandemic of the bubonic plague that spread across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Thought to have originated in Asia, it is caused by Yersinia pestis, a type of bacteria found in rodent fleas. Historians estimate that the plague killed up to 200 million people, including a third of Europe's population. However, the 14th century outbreak wasn't the plague's first rodeo. It first went wild during the 6th century as the Justinian plague. Long story short, it killed half of the population of Europe and afflicted the Byzantine Empire at the worst possible time. Since then, the plague lay dormant, never to be heard from for the next 800 years. Fast forward back to the year 1346. The Europeans heard rumors of a deadly disease quickly spreading in Asia. And what did they do with this information? Absolutely nothing. Granted, they knew next to nothing about the plague, so they thought it was just a divine punishment from God and continued their daily medieval lives. We're not exactly sure how the plague started in Europe. Some say that it started during the Mongolian besiege in Kaffa against the Italians. The Mongol army was already struck with the plague, so they had the bright idea of catapulting their infected corpses to the enemy as a last-ditch effort. But we have no evidence that this actually happened, and it is more likely that flea-infested rats snuck in between the siege lines. With the plague now in Kaffa, the Italians fled to their ships back to Genoa. Little did they know, they brought along unwanted guests that would lead to their demise. Once the ships arrived in Sicilian ports in 1347, most if not all of the crew were dead. Like any other mysterious death omen, the Italians sent the ships away. But it was too late. Those sneaky rats have already managed to escape. On those rats were fleas. When a rat dies, the fleas need a new host, and since there are not enough rats to infect, they latch onto humans. The fleas then bite the humans, infecting them with the Y. pestis bacterium. For the next few days, people in the city began having fever, vomiting in the streets, and getting diarrhea. The bacteria cause black swellings in the lymph nodes called buboes, especially in the groin, neck, and armpits. The swellings can grow as large as an apple. When left untreated, death is soon to follow. Soon enough, the number of cases exploded in Italy and quickly spread across Europe and North Africa. Large cities like Rome and Florence were affected the most, since they were the epicenters of trading. The plague wasn't picky either. Animals and humans alike. Men, women, children, even sheep and goats. The spread of the Black Death was hard to control. 1. People at the time didn't know where the disease originated. Doctors at the time believed that the plague is caused by the spirits of the dead infecting the living. 2. Traders continued to trade, and citizens fled to the countryside, carrying the disease with them. And 3. Symptoms wouldn't appear until a few weeks after being infected. This means that some people have been spreading the disease without even realizing. With the lack of medical knowledge, people began to panic. Stores closed, and art became non-existent. Some believed that the plague was sent by God, and went to great lengths to show their penitence. Others believed that it was from miasma, and burned herbs to fend off the supposedly deadly odor. Then came the plague doctors, practicing questionable methods such as leeches and bloodletting. Not only are these unsanitary, but it probably led patients closer to death's door. Though they had one method that proved effective: isolation. People abandoned their families in fear of being infected. Sailors were also required to stay in their ships for 30 to 40 days to monitor symptoms, hence the term quarantine. Only then, during its implementation in the late 1300s, did the plague begin to die down. A third outbreak happened during the late 1800s, But by then, humanity has the power of soap and science. People are beginning to practice proper sanitation. This time, scientists have discovered the actual cause of the plague, which greatly helped mitigate its spread. Could this catastrophe have been avoided? Eh, not really. For medieval Europe, a pandemic was inevitable. You see, living conditions back then weren't exactly great. Terrible sanitation, dense neighborhoods, and animals roaming everywhere. If your city is like this, it's practically begging to be infected. The bubonic plague still exists today, especially in Africa. However, thanks to modern medicine, we can now cure the disease, but it's still fatal when left untreated. The best way to prevent another outbreak is to maintain proper sanitation, to take precautions against flea bites, and to avoid touching the infected. If an outbreak does occur, the World Health Organization advises to find and stop the source of the infection as soon as possible. And just like any other contagious disease, the simplest and most effective way to prevent the spread is to follow quarantine. Less people in the streets means less carriers of the disease. History repeats, but science reverberates. Pandemics will always be a part of human history, and with each pandemic comes along human error. We will never fail to make mistakes, but it is because of these mistakes that we can learn and improve our lives for the better. Thanks for watching.